it's been my experience in growing my business that my overhead for my service department has been anywhere from 30 to 55%. When we made a lot less money annually, our total revenue, my overhead was a lot higher. It's really never been quite up to 55, but it's been as high as 52. And so the goal is you've got to make more money with what you got. So the more money you can make with what you got, you'll have higher revenues. That's going to lower your overhead as a percentage to that revenue for the year. And the lower you can get your overhead, the easier it is to sell jobs, because you can sell them for less money and still still make money and still cover all your expenses. So this is strictly just an example. These numbers are completely random, but I did use the 52% because at one time I was 52% overhead. So basically, I'm giving an example of a condenser fan motor change out. So let's say the motor cost us $90 and we changed the run capacitor at the same time. That's $10. And the service tech that's working on the job makes $25 an hour. I add those up. That is my cost of the sale, $125. Now, in order to determine what I'm going to sell that at, I'm going to come over here. Let's find it here. Basically, if my overhead's 52%, and let's say I want to make net profit of 18%, after all my expenses are paid, after my tech's paid, after I've bought the motor and the run capacitor, I want to make 18%. So I'm going to take 52 plus 18, I get 70. Then I take 100 minus 70, and that gives me a 30% divisor. So that divisor is what I'm going to use to determine my sell price. So if I take 125, which is my cost of the sale, and I divide it by 30%, I need to sell this job for $416.67 if I'm going to cover my overhead and earn 18% net profit. So now you can, just like we did on the installation breakdown, you can turn around and break it down the opposite way. So I can take $416, my sell price, minus the cost of the sale. That gives me $291. $291 is my gross profit. So that's not what I get to keep, and I don't necessarily get to keep all of that. I still haven't paid for my overhead. So if you do $291 and then you turn around and divide it by the sell price, $416, that equals a 70% gross profit margin. Now, if I take out my 52% overhead, that leaves me with exactly what I was shooting for, 18% net profit, or $75 on that particular call. So if my overhead is that high, if it's 52%, and I'm just shooting to make 18%, I know there's service companies out there making 25, 30% on calls. I know certain particular repairs will make that. Because that's another thing. A lot of times when the part costs a lot less, you can gain a little bit more margin from those particular repairs. The higher the part cost, sometimes that margin's got to come down if you want to compete with others, because your price will be so high if you're still shooting for that 18% or 20%. So basically, I got to keep $75. That's a good service call. I mean, if I could do that, 15 times a week, I'm making good money. I mean, that's all my bills are paid. I'm making good money. So the goal is to build the business up and get multiple techs going out there doing that day in, day out. So you're actually making profits of $500 a day or $600 a day or $1,000 a day. I mean, that's the goal. That's what we all want to get to. But it's tough coming up when your revenue is not high enough to cover your overhead. I mean, it'll still cover your overhead, but it's going to be high, because you've got to do more with what you got to get up there, get your revenues high so you can knock that overhead down, sell things for a more reasonable price to your clients, and get more jobs. So I took this same example right here of a condenser fan motor change out, costing us $125. And if I can get my revenues up there to knock my overhead down to 40%, let's say. So if my overhead's 40% and I want to make a net profit of 20%, then I take 100 minus 60, which was 40 plus 20 added together, and that equals my divisor, the 40% divisor. That's how I'm going to get my sale price. So I take 125, the cost of the sale, divide it by my divisor, 40%, and that equals a $312.50 sale price. 312 minus the 125, which is what it cost me, leaves me with $187 of gross profit. If I take 187 and then divide that by 312, the sale price, I get my 60% gross profit margin. Then from there, I minus my overhead out of it, which is 40%, leaves me with 20%. So I made $62 off of that call. I was able to sell it for $100 less, little over $100 less, and yet still make $62 to this guy's $75. But my price is, considerably less. My customer's a lot happier than this guy's customer. But that's the thing, is you've got to get your revenues up there to make that happen. So this is tough to get this 30% divisor, but that's what you've got to do. If you don't have the amount of jobs, you've got to have the quantity of jobs to get your revenues up, so that can come down. But when you're first starting out, that's tough to do. So you really need to sell jobs for a little more than your competition, and that's not what any of us do. As soon as you get out in a van, you start undercutting everybody, because that's just a natural thing. You don't. With my experience, I didn't know what I was doing. I knew how to fix furnaces and air conditioners. I did not know how to run a business. And I'll never claim to know everything about running a business. But knowing some of your numbers, this is one of the most important things. If you're going to have any chance of survival, is you've got to price stuff right. So, guys, I hope this helped and hope it made sense to you. Remember, this is just an example, and you got to increase your revenue without adding any additional expense, and that will help bring that overhead down so you can sell more jobs for less money, but at actually higher profits. And that's what will get you over the top. And once you get to that point, it gets easier and easier and easier, because you're more on the bigger companies around your area. You're more on their playing field. So I hope this helped, guys. Have any questions? Just say them below. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and go make money.